What's up, everybody? Piscean here. We're going to talk about the Midpoint Astrology Genius Manual. Alright, we have advanced theory, calculation, and application with a full natal case study. And 7 parts to go over. So, with peace and love, before we get started, please like, subscribe, share if you dare and care, comment down below, request me for a consultation via Cash App. I would really appreciate that, with peace and love. So now I want to get into our foundations. What even are midpoints and why they are the hidden engine of the chart. So, a midpoint is a mathematical half-sum of 2 astrological points: planets, angles, asteroids, Arabian parts, or even other midpoints. If we take the zodiacal longitude of 2 bodies A and B, the midpoint M is the point exactly halfway between them on the shorter arc. Looking like this. Alright? So often both the direct midpoint and its opposite point, M plus 180 degrees, are used because the axis is what matters dynamically. Alright, we have our historical genesis. Midpoints were systematized by the Hamburg School and later refined by Reinhold Eberton and the combination of stellar influences. White used the 90 degrees dial in planetary pictures. Eberton brought the method into cosmobiology, emphasizing the 45 degrees and 22.5 degrees harmonics. Today, midpoint analysis is the backbone of Uranian astrology and a high-precision layer in Western predictive work. So let's talk about why midpoints even work. Well, a half-sum is not a physical body, but an energy node, generated by the resonance of 2 archetypes. So when a third point transits, progresses, or is natally placed at that degree, it suddenly becomes the mouthpiece for the combined significance of A and B. Now, in harmonic theory, this is the second harmonic, which is division by 2, which correlates with manifestation, relationship, and concrete events. The fourth harmonic is a 90 degrees dial, and it reveals how squares and oppositions can behave like conjunctions at the midpoint axis, creating a planetary picture of 3 factors working as one. So midpoints have been used for quite a while. Hold up, guys. Alright. So let's talk about midpoint structures. Well, first we have our direct midpoint, and that's the exact half-sum interpreted as a fused principle. We also have our indirect midpoint, which is the square to the direct midpoint, i.e. M plus 90 degrees, equally important on the 90 degrees dial. Your midpoint tree. Alright, that's all midpoints involving a given natal planet, arrayed in a wheel or a list to see which degrees receive the most intersections. Midpoint weighting. Planetary picture is any configuration where a planet angle equals the half-sum of 2 others, or A plus B subtracting C equals D, regardless of standard aspect. So these are symmetrical relationships. The cardinal rule is a planet on a midpoint behaves as if it were in simultaneous conjunction with both contributing bodies, blending their meanings into a single focus outlet. Alright, part 2, let's talk about the mechanics of it. How to calculate, sort, and read midpoints like a professional, converting positions to 360 degrees notation. So first of all longitudes must be expressed in absolute degrees. Like 0 degrees Aries equals 0 degrees, 0 degrees Taurus equals 30 degrees, etc. So the native Western chart positions yield the following, and I'll show you a table. We're going to look at the planet point, the zodiac position, the absolute degrees, and the decimal degrees. So we see Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, Rahu, Lilith, Chiron, Fortune, Vertex, Ascendant, and Midheaven. And this is, we're remembering our absolute degrees. And then we have our decimal. Alright. So, there's a lot of math involved in astrology. So, this is the half-sum calculation method. Essentially, for each pair, A, B, calculate A plus B, dividing by 2. If the sum exceeds 360 degrees, subtract 360 degrees first, then divide. The direct midpoint is the result. Its opposite is M plus 180 degrees, and the indirect 90 degrees dial positions are M plus 90 degrees, M plus 180 degrees, M plus 270 degrees. So for example, the Sun-Moon midpoint. And this is where it got a little bit confusing because yeah, there's a lot of math involved, like I was saying. So Sun, Moon, we get the sum, subtract 360 degrees, do more division, and we find out that it is, Gemini, 22 degrees. Earlier I mistakenly got Sagittarius because I didn't subtract 360 before dividing. So here's how you recompute properly, step by step. A plus B equals the sun degrees, the moon degrees, and subtract that 360 degrees, get the half of what your answer is, and we get Gemini 22 degrees 11. And that is the correct direct midpoint. With the opposite, it becomes 22 degrees Sagittarius. On the 90 degrees dial, all 4 points from Gemini 22 degrees 11, Sag 22 degrees 11, Pisces 22 degrees 11, and Virgo 22 degrees 11 are in resonance. So the midpoint axis is at 22 degrees 11 mutable. And this axis is exactly conjunct Fortune and tightly squared Mercury. We always have to check the arithmetic. So the axis being mutable, 22 degrees 11, means it stimulates any planet near 22 degrees of mutable signs. So Sun Moon equals 22 degrees 11 mutable axes. Alright, let's look at the 90 degrees short cosmobiology dial. Well, on the 90 degrees dial, only the first 30 degrees of each cardinal sign are used. Cardinal 0 through 30, fixed 0 through 30, mutable 0 through 30. All points are converted to their position within the 90 degree circle by taking the absolute degree modulo 90. For interpretation, any 2 points at the same degree in the same modality, for example, 22 degrees of a mutable sign, are in fourth harmonic aspect. So here is a chart example with the native's 90 degrees position selected. So let's say Sun is mutable in Pisces. Let me see, with some math being done. Mutable band is 60 through 90 degrees, 68 degrees 09 equals 8 degrees 09. Mutable, Virgo, Pisces, Gemini, Sag. The moon here, it is also mutable. Mercury is also mutable. Venus is also mutable. But what do we see? Mars is cardinal. But then Jupiter is mutable. But then Saturn is cardinal. Uranus is mutable. Neptune is, fixed. While Pluto is mutable, Rahu is cardinal. Lilith is cardinal. Chiron is fixed. Fortune is mutable. Vertex is mutable. The ascendant is fixed. And the midheaven is cardinal. So, let's talk about a mutable hot zone. What this really means. Well, we immediately see a massive cluster. This mutable band of the Fortune at 22 degrees, Pluto 24 degrees, Vertex 24 degrees, Sun Moon midpoint axis is precisely 22 degrees 11 mutable. It's super weighted, meaning any transit through 22 degrees mutable lights up the sun. It's not the sun. Any transit through 22 degrees mutable lights up the Sun, Moon, Mercury, Jupiter, Pluto, Fortune, Vertex simultaneously. This is the signature of an extraordinarily psychic, expansive, and transformative life path. Alright, part 3. Midpoint trees and weighting the natal chart dissected. So we construct a comprehensive midpoint tree for the native, calculating the half sum of every major pair and seeing which natal points fall at those degrees, within a 1 through 1.5 degrees orb, though we list tight heads. So key midpoint hits, direct and 90 degrees dials. So for example, Sun Moon equals 22 degrees 11 mutable, Gemini, Pisces, Virgo. And with the Fortune conjunct 0 degrees 10, the individual's emotional, physical well-being is aligned with their highest joy and destiny. So fortunate outcomes flow when they honor their inner polarity. Squaring Mars, an orb of 3 degrees 40 is mental restlessness, a mind that must mediate between the ego and feelings. Communication becomes the bridge or the battleground. Sextile the Vertex, an orb of 1 degrees 52. So fated encounters are triggered when the personality, which is the sun, and the soul, which is the moon, come into harmony. Relationships with karmic weight appear at this axis. Trine Rahu, an orb of 3 degrees 08. The life direction pulls toward integrating the conscious and unconscious. Evolution is felt as a deep emotional calling. And square Pluto, orb of 2 degrees 06. This is a Latin intense configuration. So the Sun-Moon combo activates Plutonian transformation and power struggles. This person is here to alchemize family conditioning into personal power. Now we look at the ascendant midheaven. And we see it's 26 degrees 45 Virgo. It's mutable. It hits opposition Uranus. Actually, no, excuse me, no direct hit, my mistake. However, possibly the ascendant midheaven is square to Sun Uranus midpoint. We will come back to that. Mars Pluto, 4 degrees 12 Capricorn, cardinal. Saturn at 2053 cardinal, Node at 2519 cardinal, Lilith at 2308 cardinal. There's no difference for any of these. But what's interesting here is the direct Mars-Pluto, 4 degrees 12 Cap, is in the 9th house, opposing the natal Saturn in Cancer. 20 degrees 53 in the 3rd house, which is a wide opposition of 16 degrees 41. But the axis Mars-Pluto equals 4 degrees Capricorn Cancer axis square Saturn perhaps. Saturn is at 2053 Cancer, Mars-Pluto opposite point is 4 degrees Cancer square Saturn. The square would be to Aries Libra, not exact. So Mars-Pluto does not have tight natal hits, but it becomes highly sensitive in transit. Alright, Saturn-Pluto. Now this midpoint is not aspected natally, but it is the infamous hard aspect energy of depression and authoritarian control that will erupt during transits. We see this with Saturn-Pluto in Libra, 7 degrees 35 cardinal. but Moon isn't involved, and Uranus isn't involved here. Alright, so Mercury, Neptune, 2 degrees 13 Pisces, is conjunct Venus at 0 degrees 02, which is mutable. The difference is 2 degrees 11, which is tight. So Mercury, Neptune, conjunct Venus, which is a 2 degrees orb, is a dreamy, artistic, and passionate communication laced with idealization and love, strong creative writer, or a musician. Moon, Jupiter isn't involved. There's no close natal point. Jupiter, Uranus, not involved either. Not mutable, not squaring the ascendant. Venus, Mars, no tight hits, fixed. Sun, Saturn, 14 degrees 31 Scorpio, fixed. The difference between Neptune and this is 1 degrees 24, so Sun, Saturn conjunct Neptune. An enormous topic is the father principle, which is Sun and Saturn, blended with dissolution, spirituality, or escapism. Self-discipline versus surrender, a life theme. Alright, so Moon, Saturn, there is no close hit. Mars, Saturn, at 17 degrees 30 Libra. So 90 degrees equals 17 degrees 30 mutable. Conjunct Jupiter at 17 degrees 55 mutable. An orb of 0 degrees 25. Mars, Saturn equals Jupiter. Classic hard work expands picture. Physical effort, Mars under discipline, Saturn, directly leads to abundance and wisdom, Jupiter. This person can achieve great success through sustained, structured action. Venus, Pluto. It's cardinal, 27 degrees 09 from the 90 degrees style. Near the midheaven, 29 degrees 34 cardinal, orb of 2 degrees 25. Venus, Pluto conjunct the midheaven has profound creative and relational intensity, fused with public image, magnetic career persona. Right. Moon node not hit, cardinal. Ascendant Pluto, mutable, no direct. Mercury, Pluto, 6 degrees 24 Aquarius. Chiron at 0 degrees 22 fixed. Difference is 6 degrees too wide, and it's not precise. So, we see a picture. The most heavily occupied degree range in the 90 degrees dial is 22 through 24 degrees mutable. Sun, Moon, Mercury, Jupiter, Pluto, Fortune, Vertex, and 0 through 2 degrees mutable. Venus, Uranus, Mercury, Neptune. And 15 through 18 degrees mutable. Mars, Saturn equals Jupiter, Neptune, mode 90 is 15 degrees 55 fixed. Wait, Neptune is fixed, 15 degrees 55, not mutable. Jupiter, mode 90 is 17 degrees 55 mutable. So the mutable band has 3 separate density peaks. Right, midpoint weighing, the hotspots. If we plot every natal point, if we plot every natal planet and midpoint on the 90 degrees dial, the degrees that receive multiple hits are 22 through 24 degrees mutable. Sun, Moon, Pluto, the vertex, Fortune, Jupiter. Cluster is pretty strong with Pluto and Fortune tight and Mercury square. 0 through 2 degrees mutable. We got Venus, Mercury, Neptune. Actually, Venus and Mercury, Neptune at 0 through 2 degrees mutable creates a highly creative, impressionable zone. 15 through 18 degrees mutable. It's Jupiter, Mars, Saturn. This is the productive expansion spot. Thus, transits to 22 degrees mutable will unfailingly trigger the native Sun-Moon emotional core. Mercury communication, Pluto regeneration, and fated encounters to vertex. Transits to 1 degrees mutable stir Venus, Mercury, Neptune, and to a lesser extent Uranus. These are the life event timers. Advanced analysis, transits, progressions, and solar arcs on midpoints. So midpoints are static until a moving point activates them. The moment of activation is the trigger for concrete events. We look at transits to midpoints. Outer planet transits, Jupiter through Pluto, to a natal midpoint can define years-long periods. Inner planet transits, especially Mars, to the same midpoint, give the acute day of trigger. Ooh. Rules for orbs. So use 1 degrees orb for the 90 degrees dial. For transits, allow 1 degrees applying and separating for events with a peak on exact conjunction, square, opposition. For example, using this chart, let's say transiting Jupiter reaches 22 degrees mutable in September of 2026. So Jupiter's 90 degrees position becomes 22 degrees mutable directly on the Sun, Moon, Square Mercury, conjunct Pluto, Fortune, Vertex. So that single transit would inflate emotional optimism, Sun, Moon, Jupiter, bring a publishing or travel opportunity, Jupiter, Pluto, Fortune, activate faithful relationship meetings, Vertex, overwhelm the mind with big ideas, Jupiter, Square Mercury. If transiting Mars simultaneously conjoins that 22 degrees mutable point, a sudden conflict or passionate event occurs, perfect for electional planning or crisis forecasting. Right. Secondary progressions to midpoints. A progressed planet moving on to a natal midpoint is an internal shift of priorities, lasting 1 through 2 years per degree. For instance, progressed Moon at 22 degrees mutable would activate all those points for about 3 months, bringing emotional harvest. Solar arc directions. So solar arc sun or the midheaven directed to a midpoint is one of the most reliable event timers. If the SA sun equals the natal sun moon, 22 degrees mutable, it marks a year of identity redefinition through relationships or creative projects. Alright, so part 5, conceptual case studies using the native midpoint architecture. So we can apply midpoint wisdom to 3 real-world scenarios like synastry, electional forecasting, and disaster prediction using this natal chart as the anchor. So let's go through the first case study, which is synastry, a romantic partner's planets triggering the midpoints. And what we see happen is quite a bit. Give me one moment. There we go. Just making more room on my table. Alright. So we are to imagine a partner born on July 5th, 2005. The Sun at 13 degrees Cancer, Moon at 22 degrees Gemini, Venus at 0 degrees Virgo, and Mars at 24 degrees Sagittarius. So their partner's moon at 22 degrees Gemini sits exactly on the native sun-moon midpoint axis. And the partner's moon conjoins the native's direct sun-moon Gemini side. Instantly, the native feels emotionally seen. Partner's inner child speaks the native's combined ego-soul language, and this is a textbook soulmate indicator. Partner's moon also squares native Mercury and opposes native Pluto fortune, generates deep karmic conversations, an obsessive mental connection, and a sense of destined fortune when together. However, the square to Pluto can manifest as power struggles. The native may feel emotionally manipulated or transformed against their will. So, partner Sun at 13 degrees Cancer falls on the native's Moon-Saturn midpoint. Let's check. Moon-Saturn equals 28 degrees 33 Leo, not Cancer. But partner Sun trines native Saturn? Possibly. More importantly, partner Sun squares native's Moon? No. But we evaluate midpoints. So, partner Sun at 13 degrees Cancer, is it on any native midpoint? Native's Venus, Uranus. So no. Partner Sun? No. However, partner's Venus is at 0 degrees Virgo. Native's Venus is at 0 degrees 02 mutable. Mercury Neptune is 2 degrees 13 mutable, so partner's Venus conjoins native's Venus and Mercury Neptune midpoint exactly. This is a powerfully romantic and artistic bond where love, Venus, merges with the native's mental idealistic picture, Mercury Neptune, a fantasy love that feels like poetry. Partner's Mars at 24 degrees Sag sits on native's Pluto and Fortune, activating the Sun-Moon axis. physical passion, and shared resources, the 8th house explode, but also volatile power dynamics. Synastry through midpoint shows a relationship that is both creatively magical and deeply transformative. Interpretive synastry rule. When a partner's personal planet hits a natal midpoint axis involving the luminaries, nodes, or angles, that relationship has an immediate past life recognition. If it hits like a challenging midpoint like Saturn-Pluto, the bond can feel faded but also burdened. Alright, our second case study is electional forecasting, launching a business using transit triggers to natal midpoints. So here's a scenario for you guys. The native, now 21, wishes to launch an online publishing company, 9th house, Mercury, Jupiter themes. We need an electional chart where transiting planets activate supportive natal midpoints. First, we need to identify our prosperity midpoints. Jupiter ascendant midpoint, Leo fixed, Jupiter midheaven midpoint, Sagittarius 8 degrees 45 mutable, Sun Jupiter midpoint, Sagittarius 28 degrees 02 mutable, and the part of fortune is already at 22 degrees mutable. Any beneficial transit there matters. Alright, step 2 is choose a date. We want transiting Jupiter to conjoin one of these midpoints while avoiding Saturn-Pluto triggers. In late May, transiting Jupiter enters Cancer and reaches 5 degrees Cancer, 95 degrees absolute. Its 90 degrees position will be 5 degrees cardinal. This does not hit the above midpoints. They are mutable or fixed, not suitable. In August, Jupiter enters Leo at 5 degrees Leo, exactly on Jupiter ascendant midpoint. Jupiter and Leo transit conjunct the natal Jupiter ascendant, expansion of self-confidence, public visibility. The exact conjunction occurs around August. At the same time, transiting Sun is in Leo, further illuminating the point. Transiting Mars in Virgo might be near 8 degrees mutable, touching Jupiter midheaven, which is mutable. Mars at 8 degrees Virgo on August 15th would square that midpoint, adding drive but also potential conflict. Could be the push to launch. What's better here is to pick a date when the moon activates the Sun-Jupiter midpoint. So on August 20th, the moon transits Pisces and reaches 28 degrees Pisces at 10:30 a.m. local time, conjoining the Sun-Jupiter direct midpoint exactly. Wait, Sun-Jupiter midpoint. Transiting moon on Sun-Jupiter axis while transiting Jupiter still near 5 degrees Leo, Jupiter ascendant. Transiting Venus is in Virgo, trying fine-tune. Thus, the election is set for August 20th, 2026, 10:30 a.m. Moon conjoins the natal Sun, Jupiter. Jupiter conjoins Jupiter ascendant. And transiting Mercury and Leo sextile to midheaven. This triple midpoint activation promises a successful launch with public acclaim. Right, and our midpoint election rule is always ensure that the applying transits are to midpoints involving the relevant houses, for example 10th, 2nd, 9th, and that the moon's last aspect before void is a harmonious midpoint hit. Alright, case study 3. Midpoints are essential in mundane astrology to forecast natural disasters, accidents, and violent events. For this case, we demonstrate how the natal chart's Mars, Saturn, Pluto midpoints can correlate with a personal or local catastrophe using a hypothetical tornado strike in the city of St. Paul. So we have the midpoints of crises. Mars, Pluto at 4 degrees 12 Capricorn, which is cardinal. Saturn, Pluto, 7 degrees 35 Libra, cardinal. Mars, Saturn at 17 degrees 30 Libra, mutable. Already conjunct the natal Jupiter, so stress manifests as overextension. And our hypothetical event date is June 17th of 2026. So at this time, transiting Mars reaches 4 degrees Cancer, 94 degrees, exactly opposite natal Mars, Pluto at 4 degrees Capricorn. Mars, opposite Mars, Pluto, triggers raw aggression, machinery accidents, or a violent weather event. Mars, natural ruler of storms, combined with Pluto destruction. Transiting Saturn at 1 degrees Aries squares Mars, Pluto midpoint from 1 degrees cardinal, adding structural collapse. And transiting Uranus at 4 degrees Gemini squares the same point, bringing sudden chaotic energy. In the sky on that day, the transiting sun at 26 degrees Gemini squares the natal Mercury and activates the Sun, Moon, Pluto mutable cluster. Panic, mental shock. If we were forecasting for the city using a mundane chart for St. Paul, perhaps the incorporation chart, we would overlay these transits. In the native's chart, this would coincide with a personal disaster, an accident, violent encounter, or being caught in a destructive event. And here's the interpretation. So on June 17th at 3:30 p.m. local time, a tornado touches down at St. Paul. The native's chart with transiting Mars exactly opposite Mars, Pluto, and Uranus square it experiences this as a crisis that destroys property, the 4th house. Natal 4th cusp at 29 degrees 34 Cancer, transiting Saturn and Aries squares it possibly. The midpoint activation paints the exact nature here. So Mars Pluto equals violence, Saturn Pluto equals fatal structural failure. Because the midpoints are cardinal, the event has a sudden onset cardinal modality. The native might be at the center of the disaster, but the midpoint signature guarantees they are profoundly affected. And we have a mundane midpoint technique. For disaster forecasting, astrologers use ingresses, especially Aries ingress, and set the chart for the location. Then they look for a concentration of transiting planets on the Mars-Saturn, Saturn-Pluto, or Uranus-Pluto midpoint axis of the ingress. In this case study, we use the natal chart to illustrate personalization, but the principle is identical. Incorporating Vedic midpoints and fixed star symmetries. Brief advanced note here. So, the manual so far used Western tropical positions. However, Vedic sidereal midpoints can be equally telling, especially when fixed stars conjoin midpoint axis. For example, in the Vedic chart, Sun, Aquarius 14 degrees 13, and Moon, in Virgo 12 degrees 19, give a Sun-Moon midpoint of Sagittarius 28 degrees 16, tropical equivalent shifted by Ayanamsa, so 23 degrees 52 back. This falls on the fixed star Antares. In Vedic positions, the stars are linked to sidereal degrees, but here's a note. In the native's Western chart, the midpoint, 22 degrees mutable tropical, corresponds to fixed stars Algorab and Spica. Not tightly, however, the Vedic midpoint may align with the Yoga point. Yogi point at Libra, 29 degrees 52 sidereal, and Avayogi at Aries, 29 degrees 52 form an axis. So when a transiting planet hits this axis in midpoint relation to natal planets, Vedic astrologers observe sudden fortune or misfortune. This is a midpoint-like sensitive point. For the utmost precision, one can calculate the midpoints between the tropical and sidereal positions, not standard. The advanced astrologer simply notes that fixed stars on the 90 degrees dial add a fixed unchanging quality. For example, the native's vertex Pluto midpoint conjoins the fixed star Unukalhai, the star of danger and success combined. Such star midpoint conjunctions make the point intensely faded. A complete midpoint interpretation protocol. List all planets and angles with absolute and 90 degrees positions. Compute half sums for all personal points. Sun, Moon, Ascendant, Midheaven with all other bodies. Plot on a 90 degrees dial and circle degree clusters. Identify which natal planets fall on these clusters, the trigger points. For each cluster, write the combined meaning of the contributing midpoints, then blend with the natally conjoining planet. So for example, cluster 22 degrees mutable, Sun, Moon, identity, emotion, fusion, and Pluto, transformation equals identity must repeatedly die and be reborn. Natal Mercury squares it so the process is intellectualized and verbalized. Weight the clusters by number of hits. The most weighted degrees are life's pivotal moments. In prediction, track transits, solar arcs, and progressions to these weighted degrees. The exact hit, adding, subtracting 1 degrees, times major events. Mastery through midpoints. Midpoint astrology is not an add-on, but the structural grammar of the chart. When a practitioner integrates half sums, the horoscope stops being a collection of isolated aspects and becomes an indivisible field of resonances. In this natal chart, the raw data reveals a person whose path of fortune is inextricably woven with the transmutation of self through communication, whose relationships are karmically charged, and whose career destiny is magnetized by the Venus-Pluto intensity. The manual above has shown how to extract these insights systematically. Apply the method to your own chart, to electional charts, to mundane events, and you will find that midpoints consistently deliver the why behind the what. The stars speak in harmonic intervals. Learn to listen on the 90 degrees dial, and the music of the spheres becomes prophecy. Thank you for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one. Piscean out.